Hey guys,
What are we going to talk about today?
we're going to talk to the folks about another book that we read.
Okay,
Do I get to talk about it or you?
you get to talk about it.
I get to start?
I think I introduced the last book, so you introduce this book.
Okay. This book is called Marriage is Like Dancing. And we bought this book at our local Christian bookstore. And one of the things that we have found out with the books that we read is we don't necessarily agree with the personal beliefs of all the authors that put out books on self-help regarding marriage. But we have figured out that in order for us to broaden our minds and our horizons and to change our behaviors, we have to be willing to read through the works of other people so that we can change our mindset. So as we think about trying to view things from a different avenue and try to see it from someone else's perspective, sometimes you have to kind of gobble up all the hay and spit out the briars. So that's kind of what we're doing. We're reading through these books, and this particular book is Marriage is Like Dancing. And although Kelly and I are not dancers, we used this book and found it very informative, but not just informative. It was a really thought-provoking book, and I would recommend the book on the basis of reading it for the illustrations that are given in there, and reading it for the perspective of someone older than us, willing to use some things that we can, draw from his examples to apply to our marriage. And that's one of the things that we have done. So, would you recommend this book?
Yes. I would definitely recommend the book. I think is it a metaphor, you would say? The metaphor of dance? Well, is that what you would say? No, not a metaphor?
Yes.
Of
No.
marriage?
Yes, it's a metaphor. It is a metaphor.
Why did you say no, and then yes, and then no, and then yes?
Because I didn't know really how I wanted to answer that yet. I was thinking my way through it as you were talking. Yes, it is using marriage and dancing together. Dancing is the metaphor for marriage.
Yes, so I think it's a brilliant concept.
Brilliant.
I do. I think it is. And when we first started reading it, we were kind of not sure, but I think it's great. At the end of the book, when we finished it, we could not recommend it and talk about it because there's just too many things, too many good points in the book.
And the author's name is Richard C. Eyer, E-Y-E-R, and it's a really attractive book.
Mm-hmm.
It's got the right colors on it, and we like these colors. And as we're reading through this book, one of the chapters that really stood out to us, and we have underlined things throughout this book, but it is written really, really well. And this is coming from a man that has done a lot of work, and he talks about how that they had been married for over 40 years, and they picked up like ballroom dancing as a what would you call it? It wasn't really a hobby, because you can't put that kind of time and effort and energy into just a hobby. But
his parents danced, so
they were
ballroom dancers for years. So he just kind of picked that up from them and just kind of wanted to try it out. So it was just something for them to do on the side.
And you're right. My parents met on the dance floor in 1934, he says. They continued to dance through nearly 6 decades of marriage until Dad died at age 94. So I guess they were using it for more than just a hobby. Maybe his dad and mom were using it for exercise.
Maybe.
But that was the opening of chapter 1. And so there's a lot of years that have gone into this example of comparing marriage to dancing, or trying to use the metaphor of dancing in relationship to marriage. And when we first picked up the book, since we're not interested in doing those kinds of things, we wondered, would we like it? And you know, we don't necessarily endorse all the thoughts and the examples that are given in the book, but it is such a thought-provoking book that we couldn't just cast it aside and not recommend it to you. As a matter of fact, when we talked about the other day, there's some books that we need to go back through and reread. This was one of the ones that really jumped out at us that we need to reread, because it's so beautiful of an example with what he has experienced in his own life from his parents, that after 40 years of marriage, he thought he might try something that his parents did. So, that was kind of cool to read how he kind of came into this interest that he had. But basically what we want to do is just, yank out an excerpt from the book and let Kelly read this, and then we'll make some comments on it. But this particular chapter 3, here's how chapter 3 starts. And I love the way this chapter starts, because I've heard this a lot. And as I've heard this a lot, I've been the recipient of so many cautionary fables, in past experiences in life, where men will come to you and they'll say this, and sometimes women will come to you and say this. But in reality, men, we really need to listen to this. It says, chapter 3, it's always the man's fault. Always the man's fault. So that was kind of an attention getter for me as we read through these. If we're driving, and we will do these books in a number of different settings, but if we're driving, I'm the reader because my wife does the driving and she gets car sick. So whenever we travel together, she's the driver and I'm the rider. And so I'll either study on things, or we'll talk, or we'll read books or whatever. But when we're driving, when she's driving, I try to get her to not read the books as much, while she's driving, so that we can safely arrive at our destination. But I'll do the reading. That was a joke. I'll do the reading. And so in this particular chapter, rule number 1 for the man in ballroom dancing is, when the woman makes the wrong move in a dance pattern, it's the man's fault. So he's basing what he's saying there as this chapter title, chapter heading, it's always the man's fault. He's really basing this off of ballroom dancing. So when he's giving you this example, he's saying that one of his instructors made this comment. He says, I was certain that our instructor concealed a smile as he said this. And he says, in all honesty, I didn't believe it and laughed it off. Surely no red-blooded American male is going to assume he is at fault when his wife does something wrong. But it became very clear that in ballroom dancing, that rule was taken seriously. So at that point, I'll let you make a comment or two if you want to make a comment or two, and then we'll go over and read you our first underlined section.
Okay.
I'm working on not doing all the talking, because my mouth, usually.
No, well, to explain, so his idea, like today, this morning, we're constantly having discussions. It doesn't matter what we're doing. We have standard poodles, and if we're grooming dogs,
which we were
like
this
this morning, he was grooming one of the poodles, and we're having a conversation, or we're reading over a book. Maybe he's grooming and I'm reading the book. So when we're doing that, we start talking. We start getting into a discussion. And what's hard is, like, when we're just talking, without the camera on, it's great and it goes very smoothly. But then you turn the camera on and then you'll forget what you're going to say. And we've tried to make some notes, but you
can't do notes for live action video.
Right. So he kind of wants this to be very raw, and he says we should just, turn the camera on or turn the audio on and record us just talking, but that's just kind of hard to do. So, because we have a lot of distractions going on in the background. So we can't really do that. So we're trying to include you guys in on our discussions, because it's very thought-provoking for us and we get a lot out of it. So we're not trying to be know-it-alls, as we've said many times in these videos, or like we're the save all to all the marriages, but we just want to to give you some of the discussions and the conclusions that we've come to after a lot of years of regret and mistakes and just kind of let
a lot
y'all
of years
in.
of healing and a lot of years of seeking counsel.
Just letting y'all in, a little bit into our discussions. That's what we're trying to do. And sometimes that's kind of hard to do just off the cuff, when we're just talking, it's fine. It's easy. But then, it's hard to just...
Then you want to make it make sense, and you want to stay on topic, and you want to try to limit the time, because when you're making a video like this, like we've said in other videos, the time's just clicking away. Like we're at 11 minutes in right now. Right. And it's like your mind is going 90 to nothing, and you're trying to think of what I want to say and how I want to say it so that it comes across, proficiently. Because sometimes you might say something and you think it and it comes out and you're like, hey, that sounded good. But then when you're on the opposite end of it and you're trying to hear it, you're like, what in the world did that dude mean by that? So we're trying to be efficient in what we're doing and try to make it so that you can kind of not get bored out with what we're doing. But we also want to relay some of the stuff, because there's a lot of people who won't stop and pick up one of these books and read it. There's a lot of people who, like I was back in the years ago, to where it really chapped me. I mean, really chapped my hind end to hear my wife say, you need to read that book. You, Chris, with your problems, need to read that book that's going to solve your problems. So I really didn't want to hear it. But one of the things that has been so beneficial to us is she doesn't read a book and bring it in there and throw it down on the coffee table nightstand, or right here. She doesn't do that to me. What we do is we do it together. So as the words are being read, she's hearing it from her perspective, I'm hearing it from my perspective. And even on the conversation that we were having this morning when we were grooming the dogs, I'm in a totally different mindset because I'm concentrating and I'm trying to, do my due diligence to groom the dogs, and she's reading the book, this book that we're talking to you about right now. And I couldn't concentrate on what I needed to concentrate on because my mind was on dogs and book. Well, that's the perfect lesson to me. That is what we're really trying to do, is stop what you're doing. Give yourself an hour of togetherness. Give yourself an hour of, I'm going to stop what I'm doing, and instead of eating supper in front of the TV with the TV tray in front of you, eat supper with a book in your hand. And I know that could get a little messy. It could get, to where, you might not want to read that book when it's got, sticky fingers in it or something. But you really do need to stop what you're doing and take the time to read together. I would recommend that not only in books like this, but I would recommend you take your Bible down and read together. Learn to grow together in other ways besides just intimacy. Because intimacy in and of itself is not what it can be if you will grow together emotionally and spiritually and all these other things. It just really works out well. So on the way down here today, she's mentioning this, and we're reading this, and she's going to read the comment, and then I'll come back to what hit me kind of like a load of bricks on the way down here. We came to our favorite little spot. This is on Bay Springs Lake, and as we're at Bay Springs Lake, there was a big storm that came through a little bit to the north of us this morning, maybe 45 minutes ago. So it hadn't rained here yet, but looks like it may rain any minute. But we're just sitting here and chilling, and this has kind of become our favorite spot.
Okay, so there was several different, throughout this book, there's several different spots that we stopped at and underlined and said we need to come back to and possibly do a video on. So this may be a several-parter.
Oh, it'll have to be because we're running out of time now.
Yeah, but
if you could get me to hush long enough for you to do your thing, it'd be better.
Okay, so I'm just going to go down and just read this sentence that you kind of went with and thought that was a really good point. Are you ready?
Hammer down.
Okay. Some wise wise observer had said to us early in our marriage that if one person had a problem in the marriage, then both had a problem that needed to be faced. As our marriage matured, we found it saved time to honestly admit our faults to each other early and genuinely forgive each other so that we could move on to a solution to the problem at hand.
So as we were on our way down here, I made the comment, you'll probably have to remind me of how I made it, because my mind works so marvelously when we're having these discussions and then when we get through talking. But I made the comment that if we would just go ahead and basically admit our faults, people would be more willing, and when I mean people, spouses, would be more willing to forgive. And Kelly said, well, I actually think it's exactly the opposite of that. If we would be more willing to forgive, people may be more willing to admit their faults. And that kind of hit me hard, because that's the better statement. That is actually the better way of viewing it, because if we would admit our faults quicker, yes, people would be more willing to forgive us. And that applies on all the spectrum of life, not just in marriage. But if we were more willing to forgive, people would be more willing to admit their faults. If they knew that there wasn't going to be all this hostility and all these animosities built and all of these walls, being bricked together right there in front of us as we're trying to have this conversation, if we knew that through that conversation there was forgiveness. And it seems like today the only time you hear that word's in a church house. Forgiveness. Forgiveness should be a part of our everyday lives. Across the board. It shouldn't just be, something that's churchy talk. It should be something that we practice and we use, because at the end of the day, we're all flawed. We all have our mistakes. We all have our shortcomings, and we're not doing everything that we ought to be doing, even when we try. So we all are in need of forgiveness of some sort, but especially in our marriages. I mean, can you think of a better word in marriage than forgiveness?
No. And that's the last place we want to give forgiveness, is in our marriage.
Why? Why is that so hard for us to turn loose of our forgiving someone?
I don't know. Pride, ego. I don't know. It's
almost like we expect our spouse to be perfect. And we know they're not perfect, because if they're perfect, they sure wouldn't be with us. I mean, really.
But we'll forgive anybody. I mean, we'll forgive family members. We'll forgive friends. We'll forgive anybody. And then when it comes to
don't get too crazy with that. We don't really forgive family members. I mean, we usually hold that to at least we can get past the next family get-together so that we don't have to go. We only forgive after we get the Christmas presents. You know what I mean?
Oh, please. He's joking.
I am joking.
But it's true. We need to forgive more. We need to have a forgiving heart and always be ready to forgive, because, just like in life, we are forgiven because we forgive because we were forgiven. And how can you, just like in life and in, with God. And
then he also says, if you don't forgive, it won't be forgiven you.
Right.
So it's almost like that's a circle.
Yes. And so we expect to hold these grudges and against our spouse, and to hold things for years and hold things in our heart and set up resentment and not forgive and expect them to be perfect, like you said, and then expect everything to be forgiven of us. When we make a mistake, we do something, and that's just not real. That's not reality, and it's not right. And we should work better to do that in our marriages. And
read that follow-up statement that's behind that one.
Which one?
So that we could move on to the solution. That's the whole point of forgiveness. The whole point of forgiveness is not just so that you have every day, day in, day out, someone who's offending And then someone who's sitting there going, well, I'm sorry that you offended me, but I'm going to forgive you anyway. And we never resolve anything. The whole point of asking for forgiveness, the whole point of being forgiven is for a resolution. Well, if there's a constant pain in our marriage and we never resolve it, then there's always going to be that wound. It will never, ever heal. It'll never heal until you're ready to admit that, that's a shortcoming or a flaw. Until you're ready to forgive that shortcoming or flaw, how can that really be remedied? How can it be resolved?
That is correct. I was reading this next sentence. This next sentence caught my eye.
That's the way a woman handles things, by the way. Dude's sitting over there pouring out his heart, and he's telling her, I really this and I really that, and she's like, that is correct. And I need you to get some toilet paper from Walmart next time you go.
No. No, I was reading this about communication. We underlined. Oh, look at there. Right before the sentence, right before, dancing continued to emerge as a metaphor for marriage.
Oh, metaphor.
If either of us could not communicate clearly what we needed in our marriage, how could the other know how to respond to it?
Well, you can't. If you know something is bothering you, you do know it's bothering you if it's bothering you, but you don't communicate it, how is the other person supposed to know that was bothering you? Give you an example. The other night, we were sitting in a study group, and as we were sitting in a study, well, this was last night, we were sitting in a study group, we could hear someone, I don't know what he was doing to the styrofoam coffee cup, but he was working it over. I mean, he couldn't hear it. And he was really working that thing over, and everybody was kind of looking around trying to find out. Well,
I wasn't.
Huh?
I wasn't. I didn't.
Didn't bother you?
No. But this is the guy that if my cup is in the car and the straw, because I have what would you call that? How is that? What's that straw made of that I have?
Metal, stainless steel.
Yeah, stainless steel straw coming out of my cooler cup thing. And if it moves around, if the car is bouncing and it moves around, he first looks to see what it is, and then we have in the seatbelt area where the seatbelt is, where you move the little adjuster up and down. There's something that makes a noise in that drives him insane, and so he will spend like 30 minutes, 2 hours.
I'm like turned upside down working on the seatbelt thing while we're driving down the road at 75 miles an hour.
Trying to find something in the car to put up in there and just push it up in that spot to try to get the little whatever the noise. And I hear it, but last night when the whole chaos just broke out about him doing his cup.
I think he was rubbing the coffee cup.
He was rubbing the cup, and it was just making a noise. And when the chaos broke out, I had not even really.
Then you realized that we were trying to find out who was doing the coffee cup.
I had not even really paid attention to that noise.
Well,
I think some people do. Some people pay attention to stuff like that, and some people don't.
Well, and some things bother people, and some things don't. Like, loud noises, babies crying. When our babies were little. Still to this day, if a baby's crying, I feel compelled to try to help the situation, because babies crying really just got to me. Not like I was so compassionate that I wanted to go over there and render, some kind of aid. I just wanted to hush. I needed to try to help, but not from the way of I felt bad for the baby. I felt bad for me to have to hear it. And
and he's telling the truth.
And that is the truth. But
that is the truth.
There are certain things that
just irps you.
That irp us in life. And in your marriage, there are going to be some things that are going to come up at some point that are going to irp you. And you may think, well, it's no big deal, I'm not going to tell him about this. Well, if you don't tell him about it, or her, if you don't communicate that, okay, maybe you can get over it. Maybe it's not a big deal. But what happens when it becomes an issue of some other magnitude that you really need to deal with? And then you don't have that openness in your marriage to have that conversation. Now, at the same time, I think you could probably have too much openness. And if all you do is gripe and complain and nag all the time, then it's like the little boy that cried wolf, you know?
Yeah. If you say it's not a big deal, then it's just that. It's not a big deal. Don't bring it up. Don't ever bring it up if it's not a big deal. If it is a big deal, and to the point to where you're going to nag about it, or say something and possibly start some kind of turmoil about it, then you need to bring it up and talk about it. But it's still, at the end of the day, sometimes it's just things that, like our boys. They might get mad at us saying this, but our boys, they get on to each other for the way each other eats. Like, one of them eats a chip a certain way, and the other one says, "You know what? You eating that chip that way just irks me. I can't stand it." Well, he's not going to change the way he eats his chip because his brother doesn't like it. So,
as a matter of fact, he's going to continue eating the chip in
worse.
a very exaggerated manner.
Yes, but there's just certain things that you can't change. You just have to get over it. You have to realize, hey, I'm probably do some things or eat a certain way or do something, talk a certain way or whatever that my spouse doesn't really care for either, or that might get on their nerves. But that's stuff you just need to get. That's petty. And from what we've been through, that's petty. And you get over it. Just get over it. Just look over it and get over it if it's petty things. If it's just little petty things.
So the moral of this little video is forgive. And be so ready to forgive that the other person is ready to admit a fault, is ready to, come clean with what it is that they need to come clean with, so that there's not anything that's holding that wall of forgiveness back, that it's free. It's freely given, it's freely received, and people will really be interested to try to relate that to each other. And if you're ready to forgive whatever flaws, manifest themselves throughout your marriage, then a more willingness will be there to try to correct those things.
Right. I agree. Until next time.
Until next time.
Bye.